Okay, good morning everyone and happy Sunday. We will now continue our devotional guided meditation. I hope you will be blessed by the reading.
Development of the mental abilities. Chapter 50. What comprises true education? The breadth of true education. True education means more than taking a certain course of study. It is broad. It includes the harmonious proper education includes not only mental discipline, but that training which will secure sound morals and correct deportment. The first great lesson in all education every day for human interpretation alone is to obtain a false education, but to learn of God in Christ is to learn the science of heaven. The confusion in education has come because the wisdom and knowledge of God have not been exalted. Influence counter to selfish rivalry and greed. As such, to what motive in the greed for power, the disregard for the rights and needs of humanity that are the curse of our world find a counter influence. God's plan of life has a place for every human being. Each is to improve his talents to the utmost, and faithfulness in doing this, be the gifts few or many, entitles one to honor. In God's plan, there is no place for selfish rivalry. Those who measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves among themselves are not wise. 2 Corinthians 10:12. Whatever we do is to be done as of the ability which God giveth. 1 Peter 4:11. It is to be done heartily as to the Lord and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. Colossians 3:23 and 24. Precious is the service done and the education gained in carrying out these principles, but how widely different is much of the education now given. From the child's earliest years, it is an appeal to emulation and rivalry. It fosters selfishness, the root of all evil. The model was given in Eden. The system of education instituted at the beginning of the world was to be a model for man throughout all after time. As an illustration of its principles, first parents. The Garden of Eden was the schoolroom, nature was the lesson book, the Creator himself was the instructor. Exemplified in the master teacher. In the training of his disciples, the Savior followed the system of education established at the beginning. The 12 first chosen, with a few others who through ministry to their needs were from time to time connected with them, formed the family of Jesus. They were with him in the house, at the table, in the closet, in the field. They accompanied him on his journey, them was entered into his work. Sometimes he taught them as they sat together on the mountainside, sometimes beside the sea, or from the fisherman's boat, sometimes as they walked by the way. Whenever he spoke to the multitude, the disciples formed the inner circle. They pressed close beside him that they might lose nothing of his instruction. They were attentive listeners, eager to understand the truths they were to teach in all lands and to all ages. True education is both practical and literary. In childhood and youth, practical and literary training should be combined and the mind stored with knowledge. Children should be taught to have a part in domestic duties. They should be instructed how to help father and mother in the little things service for Christ's sake and the little things of everyday experience has power to mold the character and to direct the life into lines of unselfish ministry. To awaken this spirit, to encourage and rightly to direct it, is the parents' and the teacher's work. No more important work could be committed to them. The spirit of ministry is the spirit of heaven, and with every effort to develop and encourage it, angels will cooperate. Such an education must be based upon the Word of God. Here only are its principles given in their fullness. The Bible should be made the foundation of study and of teaching. The essential knowledge is a knowledge of God and of Him whom He has sent. It places moral training above intellectual culture. Children are in great need of proper education in order that they may be of use in the world. But any effort that exalts intellectual culture above moral training is misdirecting. Instructing, cultivating, pushing, and refining the youth and children should be the main burden of both parents and children. Its goal is character building. The highest class of education is that which will give such the early education of youth shapes their characters both in their secular and in their religious life. Solomon says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." This language is positive. The training which Solomon enjoins is to direct, to educate, and to develop. In order for parents and teachers to do this work, they must themselves understand the way the child should go. This embraces more than merely having a knowledge of books. It takes in everything that is good, virtuous, righteous, and holy. It comprehends the practice of temperance, godliness, brotherly kindness, and love to God and to one another. In order to attain this object, the physical, mental, moral, and religious education of the children must have attention. It prepares workers for God. Upon fathers and mothers devolves the responsibility of giving a Christian education to the children entrusted to them. In no case are they to let any line of business so absorb mind and time and talents that their children are allowed to drift until they are separated far from God. They are not to allow their children to slip out of their grasp into the hands of unbelievers. They are to do all in their power to keep them from imbibing the spirit of the world. They are to train them to become workers together with God. They are to be God's human hand, fitting themselves and their children for an endless life. It teaches the love and fear of God. Christian parents, will you not, for Christ's sake, examine your desires, your aims for your children, and see if education is that which will teach them the love and the fear of God. It is regarded by many as old-fashioned. The education is conquerors. They must be educated. It is ever progressing, never completed. Our life work here is a preparation for the life eternal. The education begun here will not be completed in this life. It will be going forward through all eternity, ever progressing, never completed. More and more fiction, the same knowledge, and day by day the wonderful works of God, the evidences of his power in creating and sustaining the universe, will open before the mind in new beauty. In the light that shines from the throne, mysteries will disappear, and the soul will be filled with astonishment at the simplicity of the things that were never before comprehended. Chapter 51, Preparing for School. The first 8 or 10 years, children should not be long confined within doors, nor should they be required to apply themselves closely to study until a good foundation has been laid for physical development. For the first 8 or 10 years of a child's life, the field or garden is the best schoolroom, the mother the best teacher, nature the best lesson book. Even when the child is old enough to attend school, his health should be regarded as of greater importance than the knowledge of books. He should be surrounded with the conditions most favorable to both physical and mental growth. It is customary to send very young children to school. They are required to study from books things that tax their young minds. This course is not wise. A nervous child should not be overtaxed in any direction. The child's program during infancy. During the first 6 or 7 years of a child's life, special attention should be given to its physical training rather than the intellect. After this period, if the physical constitution is good, the education of both should receive attention. Infancy extends to the age of 6 or 7 years. Up to this period, children should be left like little lambs to roam around the house and in the yards in the buoyancy of their spirits, skipping and jumping, free from care and trouble. Parents, especially mothers, should be the only teachers of such infant minds. They should not educate from books. The children generally will be inquisitive to learn the things of nature, and parents should improve the opportunity to instruct and patiently answer those little inquiries. They can in this manner get the advantage of the enemy and fortify the minds of their children by sowing good seed in their hearts, leaving no room for the bad to take root. Children in the formation of character. Lessons during the transition period. The mother should be the teacher and the home the school where every child receives his first lessons, and these lessons should include habits of industry. Mothers, let the little ones play in the open air. Let them listen to the songs of the birds and learn the love of God as expressed in his beautiful works. Teach them simple lessons from the book of nature and the things about them. And as their minds expand, that lessons from books may be added and firmly fixed in the memory. But let them also learn, even in their earliest years, to be useful. Train them to think that as members of the household, they are to act an interested, helpful part in sharing the domestic burdens, and to seek helpful exercise in the performance of necessary home duties. It need not be a painful process. Such a training is of untold value to a child, and this training need not be a painful process. It can be so given that the child will find pleasure in learning to be helpful. Mothers can amuse their children while teaching them to perform little offices of love, little home duties. This is the mother's work, patiently to instruct her children, line upon line, precept upon precept. Work, the mother herself will gain an invaluable training in discipline. Morals imperiled by school associates. Do not send your little ones to school too early. The mother should be careful how she trusts the molding of the infant mind to other hands. Many mothers feel that they have not time to instruct their children, and in order to get them out of the way and get rid of their noise and trouble, they send them to school. Not only has the physical and mental health of children been endangered by being sent to school at too early a period, but they have been the losers in a moral point of view. They have had opportunities to become acquainted with children who were uncultivated in their manners. They were thrown into the society of the coarse and rough, who lie, swear, steal, and deceive, and who delight to impart their knowledge of vice to those younger than themselves. Young children, if left to themselves, learn the bad more readily than the good. Bad habits agree best with the natural heart, and the things which they see and hear in infancy and childhood our hearts will take root and will become sharp thorns to wound the hearts of their parents. Chapter 52, Choosing the School. We sustain terrible losses. At times I find myself wishing that God would speak to parents with an audible voice as he spoke to the wife of Manoah, telling them what they must do in training their children. Of home training. It was this that impressed upon our minds the need of schools where a religious influence should predominate. If anything can be done to counteract the great evil in the strength of Jesus, we will do it. Facing a momentous issue. Parents, guardians, place your children in training schools where the influences are similar to those of a rightly conducted homeschool. Schools in which the teachers will carry them forward from point to point, and in which the spiritual atmosphere is a savor of life unto life. Whether or not our youth who have received wise instruction and training from godly parents will continue to be sanctified through the truth depends largely upon the influence that after leaving their homes they meet among those to whom they look for Christian instruction. Which class of educators? There are two classes of educators in the world. One class is those whom God makes channels of life, and the other class, one class contemplates the character of God and increases in the knowledge of Jesus, whom God has sent into the world. This class becomes wholly given up to those things which bring heavenly enlightenment, heavenly wisdom to the uplifting of the soul. Every capability of their nature is submitted to God, and their thoughts are brought into captivity to Christ. The other class is in league with the Prince of Darkness, who is ever on the alert that he may find an opportunity to teach others the knowledge of evil. Choose a school where God is the foundation. In planning for the education of their children outside the home, parents should realize that it is longer safe to send them to the public school and should endeavor to send them to schools where they will obtain an education based on a scriptural foundation. Upon every Christian parent there rests the solemn obligation of giving to his children an education that will lead them to gain a knowledge of the Lord and to become partakers of the divine nature through obedience to God's will and way. Consider God's counsel to Israel. While the judgments of God were falling upon the land of Egypt, the Lord directed the Israelites not only to keep their children within their houses, but to bring in even their cattle from the fields. As the Israelites kept their children within their houses during the time when the judgments of God were in the land of Egypt, so in this time of peril we are to keep our children separate and distinct from the world. We are to teach them that the commandments of God mean much more than we realize. Those who keep them will not imitate the practices of the transgressors of God's law. Parents must regard God's word with respect, obeying its teachings. To the parents of this day, as well as to the Israelites, God declares, "These words shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates." Notwithstanding this plain instruction, some of God's people permit their children to attend public schools. Make provision for your children to be educated in Bible principles. Bible truth neutralized, the child confused. Do our children receive from the teachers in the public schools ideas that are in harmony with the Word of God? Is sin presented as an offense against God? Is to all the commandments of God taught as the beginning of all wisdom? We send our of the truth of God. Schools in all our churches, schools who want to act well their part in the important work of educating the children of Sabbath keepers, not only in the sciences but in the scriptures. These schools, established in different localities and conducted by God-fearing men or women, as the case demands, should be built on the same principles as were the schools of the prophets. Church schools in the cities. It is of the greatest importance that church schools should be established to which the children may be sent and still be under the watch care of their mothers and have opportunity to practice the lessons of in the home. Much more can be done to save and educate the children of those who at present cannot get away from the cities. This is a matter worthy of our best efforts. Church schools are to be established for the children in the cities, and in connection with these schools, provision is to be made for the teaching of higher studies where these are called for. Provide schools for small churches. Many families who, for the purpose of educating their children, move to places where our large schools are established would do better service for the master by remaining where they are. They should encourage the church of which they are members to establish. It would be vastly better for their children, for themselves, and for the cause of God if they would remain in the smaller churches where their help is needed, instead of going to the larger churches where, because they are not needed, there is a constant temptation to fall into spiritual inactivity. Wherever there are a few Sabbath keepers, the parents should unite in providing a place for a day school where their children and youth can be instructed. They should employ a Christian teacher who, as a consecrated missionary, shall educate the children in such a way as to lead them to become missionaries. Let teachers be employed who will give a thorough education in the common branches, the Bible being made the foundation in the life of all study. In localities where believers are few, that two or three churches unite in erecting a humble building for a church school. If parents will realize the importance of these small educated centers of a Christian education, to provide this, we must sometimes establish home church schools. It would be well if several families to give to the parents that help that is needed in educating their children. This will be a great blessing to many isolated groups of Sabbath keepers, and a plan more pleasing to the Lord than that which has been sometimes followed of sending young children away from their homes to attend one of our larger schools. Our small companies of Sabbath keepers are needed to homes where they may be a help to their parents when the hours of study are ended. The well-ordered Christian home where young children can a problem for isolated members. Some families of Sabbath keepers live alone or far separated from others of like faith. These have sometimes sent their children to our boarding schools where they have received help from home to be educated. In such cases, localities would thus have had representatives of the truth who would have given character to the work of the Lord. Instead of centering so many large buildings in the two places, schools have been established in many localities. Let these schools now be started under wise direction that the children and youth may be educated in their own churches. It is a grievous offense in this line when providence serves. And establish school not to be abandoned. The school works in a place where a church school has been education make much trouble, and by their perversity make the heart of the but let him not become discouraged. Test and trial bring experience. Obedient and unruly, there is all the more need of strenuous effort. The fact that there are children with such characters is one of the reasons effective education and discipline must be. Years ago, school buildings could receive a true education. The lesson books used should be of a character to bring the law of God to the attention. The Bible should be made the foundation of education. In this work, the light and strength and power of the truth will be magnified. Youth from the world whose minds have not been depraved by habits of sensuality will connect with the work I instructed will have a most telling influence in extending the light and knowledge of truth. To me should be of the very highest order. Jesus Christ, the restorer, is the only remedy for a wrong education, and the lessons taught in his word should ever be kept before the youth in the most attractive form. The school, the home training, and both at home and school, simplicity and godliness should be maintained. To prepare for the higher grade above. To parents, he sends the word teaching and practicing evil. Get out of the large cities as fast as possible. Establish church schools. Give your children the Word of God as the foundation of all their education. This is full of beautiful lessons, and if pupils make it their study in the primary grade below, they will be prepared for the higher grade above. God has made provision. Our schools are the Lord's special instrumentality to fit the children and youth for missionary work. Parents should understand their responsibility and help their children to appreciate the great privileges and blessings that God has provided for them in educational advantages. Chapter 53, the church's responsibility. The church is a watchman. The Lord would use the church school as an aid to the parents in educating and preparing their children for this time, make it what the Lord desires it to be. God has appointed the church as a watchman to have a jealous care over the youth and children, and as a sentinel make plain to our children that the first day of the week is not the true Sabbath, and that we train for Christ. As the church, as individuals, if we would stand clear in the judgment, we must make more liberal efforts for the training of our young people, that they may be better fitted for the various branches of the great, in order that the ingenious minds of those with talent may be strengthened and disciplined and polished after the highest order, that the work of Christ may not be hindered for lack of skillful laborers who will do their work with earnestness. Let all share the expense. Let the church see that those who ought to receive its benefits are attending the school. Poor families should be assisted. We cannot call ourselves true missionaries if we neglect those at our very doors, who are at the most critical age and who need our aid to secure knowledge and experience that will fit them for the service of God. The Lord would have painstaking efforts made in the education of our children. Lift financial load of training worthy youth. The churches in different localities should feel that a solemn responsibility rests upon them to train youth and educate talents to engage in missionary work. When they see those in the church who give promise of making useful workers but who are not able to support themselves in the school, they should assume the responsibility of sending them to one of our training schools. There is excellent ability in the churches that needs to be brought into service. There are persons who would do good service in the Lord's vineyard, but many are too poor to obtain without assistance the education that they require. The churches should see those who have the truth in their heart are always open-hearted, helping where it is necessary. They lead out and others imitate their example. If there are some who should have the benefit of the school but who cannot pay full price of the schools for the advancement of educational work, we need men well trained, well educated to work in the interest of the churches. They should present the fact that we cannot trust our youth to go to seminaries and colleges established by other denominations, that we must gather them into schools where their religious training shall not be neglected. Give to missions, but do not neglect youth at home. Shall the members of the church give means to advance the cause of Christ among others and leave their own children to carry on the work and service of Satan, while we should put forth earnest efforts for the masses of the people around us and push the work into foreign fields? No amount of labor in this line can excuse us for neglecting the education of our children and youth. They are to be trained to become workers for God. Both parents and teachers, by precept and example, are so to instill the principles of truth and honesty into the minds and hearts of the young that they will become men and women who are as true as steel to God and His cause. Pray in faith, God will open ways. Some may ask, how are such schools to be established? We are not a rich people, but if we pray in faith and let the Lord work in our behalf, He will open ways before us to establish small schools and retired places for the education of our youth, not only in the scriptures and in book learning, but in many lines of manual labor. Let us arise and build. We should establish the work in right lines here at Crystal Springs Sanitarium, California. Here are our children. Shall we allow them to be contaminated by the world, by its iniquity, its disregard of God's commandments? I ask those who are planning to send their children to the public schools where they are liable to be contaminated, how can you take such a risk? We desire to erect a church school building for our children. Because of the many calls for means, it seems a difficult matter to secure sufficient money or to arouse an interest great enough to build a small, convenient schoolhouse. I have told the school committee that I would lease to them some land for as long a time as they care to use it for school purposes. I hope that interest enough will be aroused to enable us to erect a building where our children can be taught the Word of God, which is the lifeblood in the flesh of the Son of God. Will you do not take an interest in the erection of this school building in which the Word of God is to be taught? One man, when asked how much he was willing to give to the school in labor, said that offers of this kind, help will come to us. We expect to have a school building in which the Bible can be taught, in which prayers can be offered to God, and in which the children can be instructed in Bible principles. We expect that everyone who can take hold with us will want to have a show that all are interested in the success of this enterprise. Let those who have spare time give a few days in helping to build this schoolhouse. Not enough money has been subscribed yet to pay merely for the necessary materials. We are glad for what has been given, but we now ask everyone to take hold of this matter interestedly, so that we shall soon have a place where our children can study the Bible, which is the foundation of all true education. The fear of the Lord, the very first lesson to be taught, is the beginning of wisdom. There is no reason why this matter should drag. Let everyone take hold of help, persevering with unflagging interest until the building is completed. Let everyone do something. Some may have to get up as early as 4 o'clock in the morning in order to help. Usually I begin my work before that time. As soon as it is daylight, some could to be educated in a school where they can be disciplined and trained for God's service. His blessing will surely rest upon every such effort. Brethren and sisters, what will you do to help build the church school? We believe that everyone will regard it as a privilege and a blessing to have this school building. Let us catch the spirit of the work, saying, we will arise and build. If all will take hold of the work unitedly, we shall soon have a schoolhouse in which from day to day our children shall be taught the way of the Lord. As we do our best, the blessing of God will rest upon us. Shall we not rise and build? Chapter 54, Teachers and Parents in Partnership. Need for sympathetic understanding. The teachers in the home and the teachers in the school should have a sympathetic understanding of one another's work. Spirit, striving together to benefit the children physically, mentally, and spiritually, and to develop characters that will stand the test of temptation. Parents should remember that much more will be accomplished by the work of the church school if they themselves realize the advantage that their children will obtain in such a school and unite wholeheartedly with the teacher. By prayer, by patience, by forbearance, parents can undo much of the wrong caused by impatience and unwise indulgence. Let parents and teacher take hold of the work together, the parents remembering that they themselves will be helped by the presence in the community of an earnest, God-fearing teacher. Disunion may nullify good influence. A spirit of disunion cherished in the hearts of a few will communicate itself to others and undo the influence for good that would be exerted by the school. Unless parents are ready and anxious to cooperate with the teacher for the salvation of their children, they are not prepared to have a church school established among them. Teamwork begins in the home. The work of cooperation should begin with the father and mother themselves in the home life. In the training of their children, they have a joint responsibility, but it should be their constant endeavor to act together. Let them yield themselves to God, seeking help from Him to sustain each other. Let them teach their children to be true to God, true to principle, and thus true to themselves and to all with whom they are connected. With such training, children, when sent to school, will not be a cause of disturbance or anxiety. They will be a support to their teachers and an example and encouragement to their fellow pupils. The children will carry with them into the schoolroom the influence of your training. As godly parents and godly teachers work in harmony, the hearts of the children are prepared to take a deep interest in the work of God in the church. The graces cultivated in the home are carried into the church, and God is glorified. If parents are so engrossed in the business and pleasures of this life that they neglect the proper discipline of their children, the work of the teacher is not only made very hard and trying, but often rendered wholly fruitless. The teacher's work is supplemental. In the formation of character, no other influences count so much as the influence of the home. The teacher's work should supplement that of the parents, but it is not to take its place. In all that concerns the well-being of the child, it should be the effort of parents and teachers to cooperate. The instruction given the child in the home is to be such as will help the teacher. In the home, the child is to be taught the importance of neatness, order, and thoroughness, and these lessons are to be repeated in the school. When the child is old enough to be sent to school, the teacher should cooperate with the parents, and manual training should be continued as a part of the school studies. There are many students who object to this kind of work in the schools. They think useful employment, like learning a trade, degrading, but such have an incorrect idea of what constitutes true dignity. The home may be blessed through the school. If the teacher labors patiently, earnestly, perseveringly in Christ's lines, the reformatory work done in the school may extend to the homes of the children, bringing into them a purer, more heavenly atmosphere. This is indeed missionary work of the highest order. It is for directing pupils into acts of helpfulness. By little children especially, the teacher is regarded with almost unbounded confidence and respect. Whatever he may suggest as to ways of helping in the home, faithfulness in the daily tasks, ministry to the sick or the poor can hardly fail of bringing forth fruit. And thus again a double gain will be secured. The kindly suggestion will react upon its author. Gratitude and cooperation on the part of the parents will lighten the teacher's burden and brighten his path. Parents may lighten the teacher's work. If parents faithfully act their part, the work of the teacher will be greatly lightened. His hope and courage will be increased. Parents whose hearts are filled with the love of Christ will refrain from finding fault and will do all in their power to encourage and help the one whom they have chosen as teacher for their children. They will be willing to believe that he is just as conscientious in his work as they are in theirs. When parents realize their responsibilities, there will be far less for the teacher to do. Parents may be counselors to the teacher. We are to talk the love of God in our homes, and we are to teach it in our schools. The principles of the Word of God are to be brought into the home and the school. If parents fully understood their duty of submission to the Lord's revealed will, they would be wise counselors in our school and in the educational matters. For their experience in home training would teach them how to guard against the temptations that come to children and youth. Teachers and parents would thus become laborers together with God in the work of educating the youth for heaven. The parents' intimate knowledge both of the character of the children and of their physical peculiarities or infirmities, if imparted to the teacher, would be an assistance to him. It is to be regretted that so many fail of realizing this. By most parents, little interest is shown either to inform themselves as to the teacher's qualifications or to cooperate with him in his work. The parents must feel it their duty to cooperate with the teacher, to encourage wise discipline, and to pray much for the one who is teaching their children. Teachers may be advisors to parents. Since parents so rarely acquaint themselves with the teacher, it is the more important that the teacher seek the acquaintance of the least, should visit the homes of each among which they live. By coming personally in touch with their homes and lives, he may strengthen the ties that bind him to his pupils and may learn how to deal more successfully with their different dispositions and temperament. The teacher imparts a side of their opportunity can do much to arouse these parents to their possibilities and privileges. He will find others to whom the sense of their responsibility is a heavy burden. So anxious are they that their children should become good and useful men and women. Often the teacher can assist these parents in bearing their burden, and by counseling together, both teachers and parents will be encouraged and strengthened. needs tact and management. Among the youth will be found great diversity of character and education. Some have lived in an element of arbitrary restraint and harshness. which has developed in them a spirit of obstinacy and defiance. Others have been household pets, allowed by overfond parents to follow their own inclinations. Every defect has been excused until their character is deformed. To deal successfully with these different minds, a teacher needs to exercise great tact and delicacy in management, as well as firmness in government. Dislike and even contempt for proper regulations will often be manifested. Some will exercise all their ingenuity in evading penalties, while others will display a reckless indifference to the consequences of transgression. All this will call for more patience and greater exertion on the part of those who are entrusted with their education. Let rules be few and well considered. In the school, as well as in the home, there should be wise discipline. The teacher must make rules to guide the conduct of his pupils. These rules should be few and well considered, and once made, they should be enforced. Every principle involved in them should be so well explained that the teacher will not be surprised to find them applied. In the school, as in the home, the question of discipline should be considered carefully. We should hope that in the schoolroom there would never be occasion to use the rod, but if in a school there are those who stubbornly resist all counsel and entreaty, all prayers and burdens of soul in their behalf, then it is necessary to make them understood that they must obey. Some teachers do not think it best to enforce obedience. They think that their duty is to merely educate. True, they should educate, but what does the education of children amount to if, when they disregard the principles placed before them, the teacher does not feel that he has a right to exercise authority? He needs the cooperation of parents. The teacher should not be left to carry the burden of his work alone. He needs the sympathy, the kindness, the cooperation, and the love of every church member. The parents should encourage the teacher by showing that they appreciate his efforts. Never should they say or do anything that will encourage insubordination in their children. But I know that many parents do not cooperate with the teacher. They do not foster in the home the good influence exerted in the school. Instead of carrying out in the home the good influence exerted in the school, they allow their children to do as they please, to go hither and thither without restraint. And if the teacher exercises authority in requiring obedience, the children carry to their parents an exaggerated, distorted account of the way in which they have been dealt with. The teacher may have done only that which it was his painful duty to do, but the parents sympathize with their children even though they are in the wrong. And often these parents, who themselves rule in anger, are the most unreasonable when the children are restrained and disciplined in school. When parents justify the complaints of their children against the authority and discipline of school, they do not see that they are increasing the demoralizing power which now prevails to such a fearful extent. Every influence surrounding the youth needs to be on the right side, for youthful depravity is increasing. Let them sustain the faithful teachers. Parents who have never felt the care which they should feel for the souls of their children, and who have never given them proper restraint and instruction, are the very ones who manifest the most bitter opposition when their children are restrained, reproved, or corrected at school. Some of these children are a disgrace to the church and a disgrace to the name of Adventists. Let them, parents, teach their children to be true to God, true to principle, and thus true to themselves and to all with whom they are connected. Parents who give this training are not the ones likely to be found criticizing the teacher. They feel that both the interests of their children and justice to the school demand that so far as possible they sustain and honor the one who shares their responsibility. Never criticize a teacher before children. Parents, when the church school teacher tries to train and discipline your children that they may gain eternal life, do not in their presence criticize his actions, even though you may think him too severe. If you desire them to give their hearts to the Savior, cooperate with the teacher's efforts for their salvation. How much better it is for children, instead of hearing criticism, to hear from the lips of their mother words of commendation regarding the work of the teacher. Such words make a lasting impression and influence the children to respect the teacher. If criticism or suggestion in regard to the teacher's work becomes necessary, It should be made to him in private. If this proves ineffective, let the matter be referred to those who are responsible for the management of the school. Nothing should be said or done to weaken the children's respect for the one upon whom their well-being in so great degree depends. If parents would place themselves in the position of the teachers and see how difficult it must be necessarily to manage and discipline a school of hundreds of students of every grade and class of minds, they might, upon reflection, see things differently. Insubordination often begins in the home. In allowing children to do as they please, parents may think themselves affectionate, but they are practicing the veriest cruelty. Children are able to reason, and their souls are hurt by inconsiderate kindness, however proper this kindness may be in the eyes of the parents. As the children grow older, their insubordination grows. Their teachers may try to correct them, but too often the parents side with the children, and the evil continues to grow, clothed if possible with a still darker covering of deception than before. Other children are led astray by the wrong course of these children, and yet the parents cannot see the wrong. The words of their children are listened to before the words of teachers who mourn over the wrong. Teachers work double by non-cooperative parents. The neglect of parents to train their children makes the work of the teacher doubly hard. The children bear the stamp of the unruly, unamiable traits revealed by their parents. Neglected at home, they regard the discipline of the school as oppressive and severe. Such children, if not carefully guarded, will leaven other children by their undisciplined, deformed characters. The good that children might receive in school to counteract their defective home training is undermined by the sympathy which their parents show for them in their wrongdoing. Shall parents who believe the word of God continue their crooked management and confirm in their children their evil propensities? Fathers and mothers professing the truth for this time might better come to their senses and no longer be partakers in this evil, no longer carry out Satan's devices by accepting the false testimony of their unconverted children. It is enough for teachers to have the children's influence to contend with without having the parents' influence also. Chapter 56, Academy and College Training. Many losing the way in worldly institutions. It is a terrible fact that one that should make the hearts of parents tremble, that in so many schools and colleges to which the youth are sent for culture and discipline, influences prevail which misshape the character, divert the mind from life's true aims, and debase the morals. Through contact with the irreligious, the pleasure-loving, and the corrupt, many youth lose the simplicity and purity, the faith in God, and the spirit of self-sacrifice that Christian fathers and mothers have cherished and guarded by careful instruction and earnest prayer. Many who enter school with the purpose of fitting themselves for some line of unselfish ministry become absorbed in secular studies, and ambition is aroused to win distinction in scholarship and to gain position and honor in the world. The purpose for which they entered school is lost sight of, and the life is given up to selfish and worldly pursuits. And often habits are formed that ruin the life both for this world and for the world to come. Religious home influences are effaced. You pray, lead us not into temptation. Then do not consent for your children to be placed where they will meet unnecessary temptation. Do not send them away to schools where they will be associated with influences that will be as tares sown in the field of their heart. In the home school during their early years, train and discipline your children in the fear of God, and then be careful lest you place them where the religious impressions they have received will be effaced and the love of God taken out of their hearts. Of high wages or of apparently great educational advantages lead you to send your children away from your influence to places where they will be exposed to great temptations. What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Mark 8, 36 and 37. Our colleges are ordained of God. When I was shown by the angel of God that an institution should be established for the education of our youth, I saw that it would be one of the greatest means ordained of God for the salvation of souls. If the influence in our college is what it should be, the youth who are educated there will be enabled to discern God and glorify Him in all His works, and while engaged in cultivating the faculties which God has given them, they will be preparing to render Him more efficient service. The youth are to be encouraged to attend our schools, which should become more and more like the schools of the prophets. Our schools have been established by the Lord. Advantages of experience in school home. To a great extent, children who are to receive an education in our schools will make more permanent advancement if separated from the family circle where they have received an erroneous education. It may be necessary for some families to locate where they can board their children and save expense, but in many cases it would prove a hindrance rather than a blessing to their children. School home for wayward daughter. The enemy has had his way with your daughter until his toils have bound her about like bands of steel, and it will require a strong, persevering effort to save her soul. If you have success in this case, there must be no halfway work. The habits of years cannot easily be broken. She should be placed where a steady, firm, abiding influence is constantly exercised. I would advise you to put her in the college at blank. Let her have the discipline of the boarding house. It is where she ought to have been years ago. The boarding house is conducted upon a plan that makes it a good home. This home may not suit the inclinations of some, but it is because they have been educated to false theories, to self-indulgence and self-gratification, and all their habits and customs have been in the wrong channel. But my dear sister, we are nearing the end of time, and we want now not to meet the world's tastes and practices, but to meet the mind of God, to see what saith the Scriptures, and then to walk according to the light which God has given us. Our inclinations, our customs and practices are not to have the preference. God's Word is our standard. Resident students. It seems that some teachers think that none of the children and young people whose parents live in the vicinity of a school should have school privileges unless they live with their teachers in the school home. This is to me a new and strange idea. There are young people whose home influences have been such that it would be greatly to their advantage to live for a time in a well-regulated school home. And for those who live where they must of necessity leave their own homes in order to enjoy school privileges, the school homes are a great blessing. But the parental home where God is feared and obeyed and ever should be, the best place for young children, where under the proper training of their parents they may enjoy the care and discipline of a religious family administered by their own parents. Regarding the youth that are of suitable age to attend a boarding school, let us avoid making unnecessary and arbitrary rules that would separate from their parents those who live in the vicinity of our schools, unless the parents are convinced that it would be for the best interest of their children to place them under the school home discipline. They should be permitted to keep them under their own control as far as possible. In some places, parents living near the school may see that their children would be benefited by living at the school home, where they can receive certain lines of instruction that they could not receive so well in their own homes. But let it not be urged that children must in all cases be separated from their parents in order to get the advantages of any one of our schools. Parents are the natural guardians of their children, and they have a solemn responsibility to oversee their education and training. Can we not understand that the parents who have watched for years the development of their children should know best the kind of training and management they should have in order to bring out and cultivate the best traits of character in them? I should advise that children from homes within 2 or 3 miles of a school should be allowed to attend the school while living at home and having the benefits of parental influence. Wherever possible, let the family be held together. All children should be educated in the Bible and in the Scriptures. Children should be educated 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 in the Scriptures. forming these wayward youth, they receive but little credit. If the youth choose a society of the evil disposed and go on from bad to worse, then the teachers are censured and the school is denounced. In many cases, the censure justly belongs to the parents. They had the first and most favorable opportunity to control and train their children when the spirit was teachable and the mind and heart were easily impressed. But through the slothfulness of the parents, the children are permitted to follow their own will until they become hardened in an evil course. Parents to sustain teachers' authority. One of the greatest difficulties with which teachers have to contend is the failure on the part of parents to cooperate in administrating the discipline of the college. If the parents would stand pledged to sustain the authority of the teacher, much insubordination, vice, and profligacy would be prevented. Parents should require their children to respect and obey rightful authority. They should labor with unremitting care and diligence to instruct, guide, and restrain their children until right habits are firmly established. With such training, the youth would be in subjection to the institution of society and the general restraints of moral obligation. It is not to be left to children to judge whether the discipline of the college is reasonable or unreasonable. If parents have confidence enough in the teachers and in the system of education adopted by the school to send their children to it, to believe every false report. They should support school discipline. Some parents who have sent their children to school have told them that if anything unreasonable required of them not to submit, whoever might require it. What a lesson is this to give to children. In their inexperience, how can they judge between what is reasonable and unreasonable? They may wish to be away at night, no one knows where, and if required by teachers or guardians to give an account of themselves, will call this unreasonable and an infringement on their rights. Their independence must not be interfered with. What power can rules or authority have upon these youth while they consider any discipline an unreasonable restriction of their liberty? In many cases, these youth have remained in school but a short time, returning home with an unfinished education that they may have liberty to follow the bent of their untrained, undisciplined wills, which they could not have at school. The lessons of indulgence taught them by an unwise father or mother have done their work for time and for eternity, and the loss of these souls will be set to their account. An education outside the college curriculum. Children and youth should cultivate habits of thoroughness in the matter of education. The college course does not embrace all the education which they are to receive. They may be constantly learning lessons from the things they see and hear. They may study from cause to effect, from the surroundings and circumstances of life. They may learn it in no Section 13, Primary Importance of Physical Development. Chapter 57, Exercise and Health. Well-regulated employment and amusement. In order for children and youth to have health, cheerfulness, vivacity, and well-developed muscles and brains, they should be much in the open air and have well-regulated employment and amusement. Children should have occupation for their time. Proper mental labor and physical outdoor exercise will not break the constitution of your boys. Useful labor and acquaintance with the mysteries of housework will be beneficial to your girls, and some outdoor employment is positively necessary to their constitution and health. Exercise and fresh air. Those who do not use their limbs every day will realize a weakness when they do attempt to exercise. The veins and muscles are not in a condition to perform their work and keep all the living machinery in healthful action, each organ in the system doing its part. The limbs will strengthen with use. Moderate exercise every day will impart strength to the muscles, which without exercise become flabby and enfeebled. By active exercise in the open air every day, the liver, kidneys, and lungs will be strengthened to perform their work. Bring to your aid the power of the will, which will resist cold and will give energy to the nervous system. In a short time, you will so realize the benefit of exercise and pure air that you would not live without these blessings. Your lungs deprived of air will be like a hungry person deprived of food. Indeed, we can live longer without food than without air, which is the food that God has provided for the lungs. Students especially need physical activity. Inactivity weakens the system. God made men and women to be active and useful. Nothing can increase the strength of the young like proper exercise of all the muscles in useful labor. All faculties are strengthened by exercise. Children and youth who are kept at school and confined to books cannot have sound physical constitutions. The exercise of the brain and study without corresponding physical exercise has a tendency to attract blood to the brain, and the circulation of the blood through the system becomes unbalanced. The brain has too much blood and the extremities too little. There should be rules regulating the studies of children and youth to certain hours, and then a portion of their time should be spent in physical labor. And if their habits of eating, dressing, and sleeping are in accordance with physical laws, they can obtain an education without sacrificing physical and mental health. Let children be taught when quite young to bear the smaller responsibilities of life, and the faculties thus employed will strengthen by exercise. Thus the youth may become efficient helpers in the greater work which the Lord shall afterward call them to do. Few have been trained to habits of industry, thoughtfulness, and caretaking. Indolence, inaction is the greatest curse in this age. Wholesome, useful labor will be a great blessing by promoting the formation of good habits and a noble character. Plan for variety and change in work. The active mind and hands of youth must have employment, and if they are not directed to tasks that are useful, that will develop them and bless them, they will find employment in that which will work injury to them in both body and mind. The youth should cheerfully share the burdens of life with their parents, and by so doing preserve a clear conscience, which is positively necessary to physical and moral health. In doing this, they should be guarded from being taxed in the same direction for any great length of time. If the youth are kept steadily at one kind of employment until the task becomes irksome, less will be accomplished than might have been through a change of work or a season of relaxation. If the mind is too severely taxed, it will cease to become strong and will degenerate. By a change in the work, health and vigor may be retained. There will be no need to cast aside the useful for the useless, for selfish amusements are dangerous to the morals. Weariness, normal result of labor. Mothers, there is nothing that leads to such evils as to lift the burdens from your daughters and give them nothing special to do, and let them choose their own employment, perhaps a little crochet or some other fancy work to busy themselves. Let them have exercise of the limbs and muscles. If it wearies them, what then? Are you not wearied in your work? Will weariness hurt your children? Unless overworked more than to hurt you? No, indeed. They may be weary, but how sweet is rest after proper amount of labor. Sleep, nature's sweet restorer, invigorates the tired body and prepares it for the next day's duties. Why poverty is often a blessing. Riches and idleness are thought by some to be blessings indeed, but those who are always busy and who cheerfully go about their daily tasks are the most happy and enjoy the best health. The sentence that that man must toil for his daily bread and the promise of future happiness and glory both came from the same throne, and both are blessings. Poverty in many cases is a blessing, for it prevents youth and children from being ruined by inaction. The physical as well as the mental powers should be cultivated and properly developed. The first and constant care of parents should be to see that their children have firm constitutions, that they may be sound men and women. It is impossible to attain this object without physical exercise. For their own physical health and moral good, children should be taught to work, even if there is no necessity so far as want is concerned. If they would have pure and virtuous characters, they must have the discipline of well-regulated labor, which will bring into exercise all the muscles. The satisfaction that children will have in being useful and in denying themselves to help others will be the most helpful pleasure they ever enjoyed. Mental and physical activities equalized. Students should not be permitted to take so many studies that they will have no time for physical training. The health cannot be preserved unless some portion of each day is given to muscular exertion in the open air. Stated hours should be devoted to manual labor of some kind, anything that will call into action all parts of the body. Equalize the taxation of the mental and the physical powers, and the mind of the student will be refreshed. If he is diseased, physical exercise will often help the system to recover its normal condition. When students leave college, they should have better health and a better understanding of the laws of life than when they enter it. The health should be as sacredly guarded as the character. Youthful energy, how rashly squandered. The youth in the freshness and vigor of life little realize the value of their abounding energy. A treasure more precious than gold, more essential to advancement than learning or rank or riches. How lightly is it held, how rashly squandered. In the study of physiology, pupils should be led to see the value of physical energy and how it can be so preserved and developed as to contribute in the highest degree to success in life's great struggle. Activity not to be repressed but guided. Our children stand as it were at the parting of the ways. On every hand the world's enticements to self-seeking and self-indulgence call them away from the path cast up for the ransom to the Lord. Whether their lives shall be a blessing or a curse depends upon the choice they make. Overflowing with energy, eager to test their untried capabilities, they must find some outlet for their superabounding life. Active they will be for good or for evil. God's word does not repress activity, but guides it aright. God does not bid the youth to be less aspiring. The elements of character that make a man truly successful and honored among men, the irrepressible desire for some greater good, the indomitable will, the strenuous application, the untiring perseverance are not to be discouraged. To be directed to the attainment of objects is much higher than mere selfish and interests, as the heavens are higher than the earth. Chapter 58, Training for Practical Life. Why God appointed labor for Adam and Eve. The Lord made Adam and Eve and placed them in the Garden of Eden to dress the garden and to keep it for the Lord. It was for their happiness to have some employment, or else the Lord would not have appointed them their work. When in counsel with the Father before the world was, it was designed that the Lord God should plant a garden for Adam and Eve in Eden, and give them the task of caring for the fruit trees and cultivating and training the vegetation. Useful labor was to be their safeguard, and it was to be perpetuated throughout all generations to the close of Earth's history. The example of Jesus was the perfect workman. In his earth life, Christ was obedient and helpful in the home. He learned the carpenter's trade and worked with his own hands in the little shop at Nazareth. The Bible says of Jesus, and the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. As he worked in childhood and youth, mind and body were developed. He did not use his powers recklessly, but gave them such exercise as would keep them in health, that he might do the best work in every line. He was not willing to be defective even in the handling of tools. He was perfect as a workman as he was perfect in character. Every article he made was well made, the different parts fitting exactly, the whole able to bear test. He toiled with daily patient hands. Jesus made the lowly paths of human life sacred by his example. His life was one of diligent industry. He, the majesty of heaven, walked the streets, clad in the simple garb of the common laborer. He toiled up and down the mountain steeps, going to and from his humble work. Angels were not sent to bear him on their pinions up the tiresome ascent, or to lend their strength in performing his lowly task. Yet when he went forth to contribute to the support of the family by his daily toil, he was there feeding the 5,000 hungry souls on the shore of Galilee. But he did not employ his divine power to lessen his burdens or lighten his toil. He had taken upon himself the form of humanity with all its attendant ills, and he flinched not from its severest trials. He lived in a peasant's home. He was clothed in coarse garments, mingled with the lowly. He toiled daily with patient hands. His example shows us that it is man's duty to be industrious, that labor is honorable. For a long time Jesus dwelt at Nazareth, unhonored or unknown, that he might teach men how to live near God while discharging the humble duties of life. It was a mystery to angels that Christ, the majesty of heaven, should condescend not only to take upon himself humanity, but to assume its heaviest burdens and most humiliating offices. This he did in order to become like one of us, that he might be acquainted with the toil, the sorrows, and the fatigue of the children of men. Awaken ambition for useful accomplishments. In the children and youth, an ambition should be awakened to take their exercise in doing something that will be beneficial to themselves and helpful to others. The exercise that develops and character, that teaches the hands to hold, that trains the youth to bear their share of life's burdens, is that which gives physical strength and quickens every faculty. And there is a reward in virtuous industry, in the cultivation of the habit of living to do good. The youth need to be taught that life means earnest work, responsibility, caretaking. They need a training that will make them practical men and women who can cope with emergencies. They should be taught that the discipline of systematic, well-regulated labor is essential, not only as a safeguard against the vicissitudes of life, but as an aid to all-around development. Work position does not require housework is belittling, and although the physical exercise required to perform household labor, if not too severe, is calculated to promote health, yet they seek for an education that will fit them to become teachers or clerks, or they learn some trade that will confine them indoors to sedentary employment. The world is full of young men and women who pride themselves upon their ignorance of any useful labor, and they are almost invariably frivolous, vain, fond of display, unhappy, unsatisfied, and too often dissipated and unprincipled. Such characters are a blot upon society and a disgrace to their parents. None of us should be ashamed of work, however small and servile it may appear. Labor is ennobling. All who toil with head or hands are working their and honoring their religion much as they are in going to meetings. While the hands are engaged in the most common labor, the mind may be elevated and ennobled by pure and holy thoughts. Youth to be masters, not slaves of labor. The youth should be led to see the true dignity of labor. One great reason why physical toil is looked down on is the slipshod, unthinking way in which it is so often performed. It is done from necessity, not from choice. The worker puts no heart into it, and he neither preserves self-respect nor wins the respect of others. Manual training should correct this error. It should develop habits of accuracy and thoroughness. Pupils should learn tact and system. They should learn to economize time and to make every move count. They should not only be taught the best methods, but be inspired with ambition constantly to improve. Let it be their aim to make their work as nearly perfect as human brains and hands can make it. Such training will make the youth masters and not slaves of labor. It will lighten the lot of the hard toiler and will ennoble even the humblest occupation. He who regards work as mere drudgery and settles down to it with self-complacent ignorance, making no effort to improve, will find it indeed a burden. But those who recognize science in the humblest work will see in it nobility and beauty and will take pleasure in performing it with faithfulness and efficiency. Wealth not to excuse from practical training. In many cases, parents who are wealthy do not feel the importance of giving their children an education in the practical duties of life as well as the sciences. They do not see the necessity for the good of their children's minds and morals and for their future usefulness of giving them a thorough understanding of useful labor. This is due their children, that should misfortune come, they could stand forth in noble independence, knowing how to use their hands. If they have a capital of strength, they cannot be poor even if they have not a dollar. Many who in youth were in affluent circumstances may be robbed of all their riches and be left with parents and brothers and sisters dependent upon them for sustenance. Then how important that every youth be educated to labor, that they may be prepared for any emergency. Riches are indeed a curse when their possessors let them stand in the way of their sons and daughters obtaining a knowledge of useful labor, that they may be qualified for practical life. Children to share domestic duties. The faithful mother will not, cannot be a devotee to fashion, neither will she be a domestic slave to humor the whims of her children and excuse them from labor. She will teach them to share with her domestic duties, that they may have a knowledge of practical life. If the children share the labor with their mother, they will learn to regard useful employment as essential to happiness, ennobling rather than degrading. But if the mother educates her children to be indolent, while she bears the heavy burdens of domestic life, she is teaching them to look down upon her as their servant, do the things they should do, the mother duty. Some mothers are at fault in releasing their daughters from toil and care. By so doing, they encourage them in indolence. The excuse these mothers sometimes plead is, "My daughters are not strong," but they take the sure course to make them weak and inefficient. Well-directed labor is just what they require to make them strong, vigorous, cheerful, happy, and courageous to meet the various trials with which this life is beset. Assign useful tasks to children. The carelessness of parents in neglecting to furnish employment to their children has resulted in untold evil, imperiling the lives of many youth and sadly crippling their usefulness. God desires both parents and teachers to train children in the practical duties of everyday life. Encourage industry. Girls and even boys who do not have outdoor work should learn how to help the mother. From childhood, boys and girls should be taught to bear heavier and still heavier burdens, intelligently helping in the work of the family firm. Mothers, patiently show your children how to use their hands. Let them understand that their hands are to be used as skillfully as are yours in the household work. Each child in the family should have a part of the home burden to bear and should be taught to perform his task faithfully and cheerfully. If the work is portioned out in this way and the children grow up accustomed to bearing suitable responsibilities, no member of the household will be overburdened, and everything will move off pleasantly and smoothly in the home. A proper economy will be maintained for each. Mothers clothing is a training that need not make any boy less manly. It will make him happier and more useful. And if girls in turn could learn to harness and drive a horse, and to use the saw and the hammer as well as the rake and the hoe, they would be better fitted to meet the emergencies of life. It is as essential for our daughters to learn the proper use of time as it is for our sons, and they are equally accountable to God for the manner in which they occupy it. Life is given us for wise improvement of the talents we possess. See privileges in conserving mother's strength. Every day there is housework to do, cooking, washing, dishes, sweeping, and dusting. Mothers, have you taught your daughters to do these daily duties? Their muscles need exercise. In place of getting exercise by jumping and playing ball or croquet, let their exercise be to some purpose. Teach the children to bear their share of the burdens of the household. Keep them occupied at some useful employment. Show them how to do their work easily and well. Help them to realize that by lightening the burdens of their mother, they are preserving her strength and prolonging her life. Many a weary mother has been laid away in an untimely grave for no other reason than that her children were not taught to share her burdens. By encouraging a spirit of unselfish service in the home, parents are drawing their children closer to Christ, who is the embodiment of unselfishness. And experiment in happiness. Children, seat your mother in the easy chair and tell her to show you what she would have done first. What a surprise this would be to many weary, overtaxed mothers. Never will children and youth feel the peace of contentment until by the faithful performance of home duties they relieve the tired hands and weary heart and brain of the mother. These are steps on the ladder of progress that will carry them forward to receive the higher education. It is the faithful performance of everyday duties that brings the satisfaction and peace that come to the true home worker. Those who neglect to bear part of the responsibilities of the home are the ones who are troubled with loneliness and discontent, for they have not learned the truth that those who are happy because they share the daily routine of work which rests upon the mother or other members of the family. Many are leaving unlearned the most useful lessons which it is essential for their future good to understand. The reward of faithfulness in home duties. A faithful fulfillment of home duties, filling the position you can occupy to the best advantage, be it ever so simple and humble, is truly elevating. This divine influence is needed. In this there is peace and sacred joy. It possesses healing power. It will secretly and insensibly soothe the wounds of the soul and even the sufferings of the body. Peace of mind which comes from pure and holy motives and actions will give free and vigorous spring to all the organs of the body. Inward peace and a conscience void of offense toward God will quicken and invigorate the intellect like dew distilled upon the tender plants. The will is then rightly directed and controlled and is more decided and yet free from perverseness. The meditations are pleasing because they are sanctified. The serenity of mind which you may possess will bless all with whom you associate. This peace and calmness will in time become natural and will reflect its precious rays upon all around you to be again reflected upon you. The more you taste this heavenly peace and quietude of mind, the more it will increase. It is an animated living pleasure which does not throw all the moral energies into a stupor, but awakens them to increased activity. Perfect peace is an attribute of heaven which angels possess. There will be activity in heaven. The angels are workers. They are ministers of God to the children of men. Those slothful servants who look forward to a heaven of inaction have false ideas of what constitutes heaven. The Creator has prepared no place for the gratification of sinful indolence. Heaven is a place of interested activity. Yet to the weary and heavy laden, to those who have fought the good fight of faith, it will be a glorious rest, for the youth and vigor of immortality will be theirs, and against sin and Satan they will no longer have to contend. To these energetic workers, a state of eternal indolence would be irksome. It would be no heaven to them. The path of toil appointed to the Christian on earth may be hard and wearisome, but it is honored by the footprints of the Redeemer. and he is safe who follows in that sacred way. Chapter 59, Teaching Useful Trades. Every child should learn some trade. The carelessness of parents in failing to furnish employment to the children that they have taken the responsibility of bringing into the world has resulted in untold evil, imperiling the lives of many youth and greatly crippling their usefulness. It is a great mistake to permit young men to grow up without learning some trade. From the pillar of cloud, Jesus gave directions through Moses to the Hebrews that they should educate their children to work, that they should teach them trades, and that none should be idle. You should help your children to acquire a knowledge that, if necessary, they could live by their own labor. You should teach them to be decided in following the calls of duty. Teach use of tools. When children reach a suitable age, they should be provided with tools. If their work is made interesting, they will be found apt pupils in the use of tools. If the father is a carpenter, he should bring his boy lessons in house building, even bringing into his instruction lessons from the Bible, the words of scriptures in which the Lord compares human beings to his building. Train sons in agriculture. Fathers should train their sons to engage with them in their trades and employments. Farmers should not think that agriculture is a business that is not elevated enough for their sons. Agriculture should be advanced by scientific knowledge. Farming has been pronounced unprofitable. People say that the soil does not pay for the labor expended upon it, and they bemoan the hard fate of those who till the soil. But should persons of proper ability take hold of this line of employment and make a study of the soil and learn how to plant, to cultivate, and to gather in the harvest, more encouraging results might be seen. Many say we have tried agriculture and know what its results are, and yet these very ones need to know how to cultivate the soil and to bring science into their work. Their plowshares should cut deeper, broader furrows, and they need to learn that in tilling the soil they need not become common and coarse in their natures. Let them learn to put in the seed in its season, to give attention to vegetation, and to follow the plan that God has devised. Training of outstanding value. No line of manual training is of more value than agriculture. A greater effort should be made to create and to encourage an interest in agricultural pursuits. Let the teacher call attention to what the Bible says about agriculture, that it was God's plan for man to till the earth, that the first man, the ruler of the whole world, was given a garden to cultivate, and that many of the world's greatest men in real nobility have been tillers of the soil. Show the opportunities in such a life. He who earns his livelihood by agriculture escapes many temptations and enjoys unnumbered privileges and blessings denied to those whose work lies in the great cities. And in these days of mammoth trusts and business competition, there are few who enjoy so real an independence and so great certainty of fair return for their labor as does the tiller of the soil. Fresh produce is of special value. Families and institutions should learn to do more in the cultivation and improvement of land. If people only knew the value of the products of the ground, which the earth brings forth in their season, more diligent efforts would be made to cultivate the soil. All should be acquainted with the special value of fruits and vegetables fresh from the orchard and garden. School to give instruction in useful trades. Manual training is deserving of far more attention than it has received. Schools should be established that, in addition to the highest mental and moral culture, shall provide the best possible facilities for physical development and industrial training. Instruction should be given in agriculture, manufactures, as many as possible of the most useful trades, also in household economy, healthful cookery, sewing, hygienic dressmaking, the treatment of the sick, and kindred lines. Gardens, workshops, and treatment rooms should be provided, and the work in every line should be under the direction of skilled instructors. be loaded down with food containing condiments and spices. We are not to indulge in any habit that will weaken physical or mental strength or abuse our powers in any way. We are to do all in our power to keep ourselves in health in order that we may have sweetness of disposition, a clear mind, and be able to distinguish between the sacred and the common, and honor God in our bodies and in our spirits, which are His. Importance of correct posture. Among the first things to be aimed at should be a correct position, both in sitting and in standing. God made man upright, and He desires him to possess not only the physical but the mental and moral benefit, the grace and dignity and self-possession, the courage and self-reliance which are an erect bearing so greatly tends to promote. Let the teacher give instruction on this point by example and by precept. Show what a correct position is and insist that it shall be maintained. Respiration and vocal culture. Next in importance to right position are respiration and vocal culture. The one who sits and stands erect is more likely than others to breathe properly, but the teacher should impress upon his pupils the importance of deep breathing. Show how the healthy action of the respiratory organs assisting the circulation of the blood invigorates the whole system, excites the appetite, promotes digestion, and induces sound, sweet sleep, thus not only refreshing the body but soothing and tranquilizing the mind. And while the importance of deep breathing is shown, the practice should be insisted upon. Let exercises be given which will promote this and see that the habit becomes established. The training of the voice has an important place in the physical culture, since it tends to expand and strengthen the lungs and thus to ward off disease. To ensure correct delivery in reading and speaking, see that the abdominal muscles have full play in breathing and that the respiratory organs are unrestricted. Let the strain come on the muscles of the abdomen rather than on those of the throat. Great weariness and serious disease of the throat and lungs may thus be prevented. Careful attention should be given to securing distinct articulation, smooth, well-modulated tones, and a not too rapid delivery. This will not only promote health, but will add greatly to the agreeableness and efficiency of the student's work. 3 essentials for family happiness. In the study of hygiene, the earnest teacher will improve every opportunity to show the necessity of perfect cleanliness, both in personal habits and in all one's surroundings. The value of the daily bath in promoting health and in stimulating mental action should be emphasized. Attention should be given also to sunlight and ventilation, the hygiene of the sleeping room and the kitchen. Teach the pupils that a healthy sleeping room, a thoroughly clean kitchen, and a tastefully arranged, wholesomely supplied table will go farther towards securing the happiness of the family and the regard of every sensible visitor than any amount of expensive furnishing in the drawing room. That the life is more than meat and the body is more than raiment. Luke 12:23 is a lesson no less needed now than when given by the divine teacher 1800 years ago. Seek to understand nature's remedies: pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power. These are the true remedies. Every person should have a knowledge of nature's remedial agencies and how to apply them. It is essential both to understand the principles involved in the treatment of the sick and to have a practical training that will enable one rightly to use this knowledge. The use of natural remedies requires an amount of care and effort that many are not willing to give. Nature's process of healing and upbuilding is gradual, and to the impatient it seems slow. The surrender of hurtful indulgences requires sacrifice, but in the end it will find that nature, untrammeled, does her work wisely and well. Those who persevere in obedience to her laws will reap the reward in health of body and health of mind. A comprehensive code. In regard to that which we can do for ourselves, here is a point that requires careful thought and consideration. I must become acquainted with myself. I must be a learner always as to how to take care of this building, the body God has given me, that I may preserve it in the very best condition of health. I must eat those things that will be for my very best good physically, and I must take special care to have my clothing such as will conduce to a healthful circulation of the blood. I must not deprive myself of exercise and air. I must get all the sunlight that it is possible for me to obtain. I must have wisdom to be a faithful guardian of my body. I should do a very unwise thing to enter a cool room when in a perspiration. I should show myself an unwise steward to allow myself to sit in the draft and thus expose myself so as to take cold. I should be unwise to sit with cold feet and limbs and thus drive back the blood from the extremities to the brain or internal organs. I should always protect my feet in damp weather. I should eat regularly of the most healthful food which will make the best quality of blood, and should not work intemperately if it is in my power to avoid doing so. And when I violate the laws God has established in my being, I am to repent and reform and place myself in the most favorable condition under the doctors God has provided: pure air, pure water, and the healing precious sunlight. We are individually responsible to God. Our bodies are Christ's purchased possession, and we are not at liberty to do with them as we please. All who understand the laws of health should realize their obligation to obey these laws which God has established in their being. Obedience to the laws of health are to be made a matter of personal duty. We ourselves must suffer the results of violated laws. We must individually answer to God for our habits and practices. Therefore, the question with us is not, what is the world's practice, but how shall I, as an individual, treat the habitation that God has given me? Section 14, Maintaining Physical Fitness. Chapter 61, The Homemaker in the Calling of the Homemaker. There can be no employment more important than that of housework. To cook well, to present healthful food, the food that is to be placed in our stomachs to be converted into blood to nourish the system occupies a most important and elevated position. It is essential for every youth to have a thorough acquaintance with everyday duties. If need be, a young woman can dispense with the knowledge of French and algebra or even of the piano, but it is indispensable that she learn to make good bread, to fashion neatly fitting garments, and to perform efficiently the many duties that pertain to homemaking. To the health and happiness of the whole family, nothing is more vital than skill and intelligence on the part of the cook. By ill-prepared, unwholesome food, she may hinder and even ruin both the adult's usefulness and the child's development. Or providing food adapted to the needs of the body and at the same time inviting and palatable, she can accomplish as much in the right as otherwise she accomplished in the wrong direction. So in many ways, life's happiness is bound up with faithfulness in common duties. The science of cooking is an essential art. The science of cooking is not a small matter. This art should be regarded as the most valuable of all the arts because it is so closely connected with life. It should receive more attention, for in order to make good blood, the system requires good food. The foundation of that which keeps people in health is the medical missionary work of good cooking. Often good health is made health deformed by the unpalatable preparation of food. The lack of knowledge regarding healthful cookery must be remedied before health reform is a success. Good cooks are few. Many mothers need to take lessons in cooking that they may set before the family well-prepared, neatly served food. Seek to become mistress of the art. Our sisters often do not know how to cook. To such I would say, I would go to the very best cook that could be found in the country and remain there if necessary for weeks until I become mistress of the art, an intelligent, skillful cook. I would pursue this course if I were 40 years old. It is your duty to know how to cook, and it is your duty to teach your daughters to cook. Study and practice. Food can be prepared simply and healthfully, but it requires skill to make it both palatable and nourishing. In order to learn how to cook, women should study and then patiently reduce what they learn to practice. People are suffering because they will not take the trouble to do this. I say to such, it is time for you to arouse your dormant energies and inform yourselves. Do not think the time wasted which is devoted to obtaining a thorough knowledge and experience in the preparation of healthful, palatable food. No matter how long an experience you have had in cooking, if you still have the responsibilities of a family, it is your duty to learn how to care for them properly. Both variety and simplicity are essential. Meals should be varied. The same dishes prepared in the same way should not appear on the table meal after meal and day after day. The meals are eaten with greater relish and the system is better nourished when the food is varied. Our bodies are constructed from what we eat, and in order to make tissues of good quality, we must have the right kind of food, and it must be prepared with such skill as will best adapt it to the wants of the system. It is a religious duty for those who cook to learn how to prepare healthful food in a variety of ways so that it may be both palatable and healthful. Even in the table arrangements, fashion and show exert their baleful influence. The healthful preparation of food becomes a secondary matter. The serving of a great variety of dishes absorbs time, money, and taxing labor without accomplishing any good. It may be fashionable to have half a dozen courses at a meal, but the custom is ruinous to health. It is a fashion that sensible men and women should condemn by both precept and example. How much better it would be for the health of the household if the table preparations were more simple. Results of poor cooking. Poor cookery is wearing away the life energies of thousands. More souls are lost from this cause than many realize. It deranges the system and produces disease. In the conditions thus induced, heavenly things cannot be readily discerned. Scanty, ill-cooked food depraves the blood by weakening the blood-making organs. It deranges the system and brings on disease with its accompaniment of irritable nerves and bad tempers. The victims of poor cookery are numbered by thousands and tens of thousands. Over many graves might be written, died because of poor cooking, died of an abused stomach. Teach your children how to cook. Do not neglect to teach your children how to cook. In so doing, you impart to them principles which they must have in their religious education. In giving your children lessons in physiology and teaching them how to cook with simplicity and yet with skill, you are laying the foundation for the most useful branches of education. Skill is required to make good light bread. There is religion in good cooking, and I question the religion of that class who are too ignorant and too careless to learn to cook. Instruct them patiently and cheerfully. Mothers should take their daughters into the kitchen with them when very young and teach them the art of cooking. The mother cannot expect her daughters to understand the mysteries of housekeeping without education. She should instruct them patiently, lovingly, and make the work as agreeable as she can by her cheerful countenance and encouraging words of approval. If they fail once, twice, or thrice, censure not. Already discouragement is doing its work and tempting them to say, "It is of no use, I can't do it." This is not the time for censure. The will is becoming weakened. It needs the spur of encouraging, cheerful words, as "Never mind the mistakes you have made. You are but a learner and must expect to make blunders. Try again. Put your mind on what you are doing. Be very careful and you will certainly succeed." How interest and ardor may be cooled. Many mothers do not realize the importance of this branch of knowledge, and rather than have the trouble and care of instructing their children and bearing with their failings and errors while learning, they prefer to do all themselves. And when their daughters make a failure in their efforts, they send them away with, "It is no use, you can't do this or that. You perplex and trouble me more than you help me." Thus the first efforts of the learner are repulsed, and the first failure so cools their interest and ardor to learn that they dread another trial and will propose to sew, knit, clean house, anything but cook. Here the mother was greatly at fault. She should have patiently instructed them that they might by practice obtain an experience which would remove the awkwardness and remedy the unskillful movements of the inexperienced worker. The most necessary preparation young women can make for practical life. Young ladies should be thoroughly instructed in cooking. Whatever may be their circumstances in life, here is knowledge which may be put to a practical use. It is a branch of education which has the most direct upon human life especially the lives of those held most dear. I prize my seamstress, I value my copyist, but my cook who knows well how to prepare the food to sustain life and nourish bone, brain, and muscle fills the most important place among the helpers in my family. Young women think that it is menial to cook and do other kinds of housework, and for this reason many girls who marry and have the care of families have little idea of the duties devolving upon a wife and mother. Thus build a barrier against folly and vice. When you are teaching them, your daughters, the art of cookery, you are building around them a barrier that will preserve them from folly and vice, which they may otherwise be tempted to engage in. Men as well as women should learn to cook. Men as well as women need to understand the simple, healthful preparation of food. Their business often calls them where they cannot obtain wholesome food. Then if they have a knowledge of cookery, they can use it to good purpose. Both young men and young women should be taught how to cook economically and to dispense with everything in the line of flesh food. Study economy, avoid waste. In every line of cooking, the question that should be considered is, how shall the food be prepared in the most natural and inexpensive manner? And there should be careful study that the fragments of food left over from the table be not wasted. Study how that in some way these fragments of food shall not be lost. This skill, economy, and tact is a fortune. In the warmer parts of the season, prepare less food. Use more dry substance. There are many poor families who, although they have scarcely enough to eat, can often be enlightened as to why they are poor. There are so many jots and tittles wasted. Serious questions for reflection. Whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do all to the glory of God. Do you do this when you prepare food for your tables and call your family to partake of it? Are you placing before your children only the food that you know will make the very best blood? Is it that food that will preserve their systems in the least feverish condition? Is it that which will place them in the very best relation to life and health? Is this the food that you are studying to place before your children? Or do you, regardless of their future good, provide for them unhealthful, stimulating, irritating food? Chapter 62, Eating to Live. God appointed the inclinations and appetites. Our natural inclinations and appetites were divinely appointed, and when given to man were pure and holy. It was God's design that reason should rule the appetites and that they should minister to our happiness. And when they are regulated and controlled by a sanctified reason, they are holiness unto the Lord. The education of the Israelites included all their habits of life. Everything that concerned their well-being was a subject of divine solicitude and came within the province of divine law. Even if
Enter to Bluetooth.
Nalobat.
Enter aux in playing.
food we eat. Our bodies are built up from the food we eat. There is a constant breaking down of the tissues of the body. Every movement of every organ involves waste, and this waste is repaired from our food. Each organ of the body requires its share of nutrition. The brain must be supplied with its portion. The bones, muscles, and nerves demand theirs. It is a wonderful process that transforms the food into blood and uses this blood to build up the varied parts of the body. But this process is going on continually, supplying with life and strength each nerve, muscle, and tissue. Begin with correct infant feeding. The importance of training children to right dietetic habits can hardly be overestimated. The little ones need to learn that they eat to live and not live to eat. The training should begin with the infant in its mother's arms. The child should be given food only at regular intervals and less frequently as it grows older. It should not be given sweets or the food of older persons, which it is unable to digest. Care and regularity in the feeding of infants will not only promote health and thus tend to make them quiet and sweet-tempered, but will lay the foundation of habits that will be a blessing to them in after years. Educate tastes and appetite. As children emerge from babyhood, great care should still be taken in educating their tastes and appetite. Often they are permitted to eat what they choose and when they choose without reference to health. The pains and money so often lavished upon unwholesome babies leads the young to think that the highest object in life and that which yields the greatest amount of happiness is to be able to indulge the appetite. The result of this training is gluttony, then comes sickness. Parents should train the appetites of their children and should not permit the use of unwholesome foods. Spiritual, mental, and physical powers influenced by diet. Mothers who gratify the desires of health and happy tempers are sowing seeds of evil that will spring up and bear fruit. Self-indulgence grows with the growth of the little ones, and both mental and physical vigor are sacrificed. Mothers who do this work reap with bitterness the seed they have sown. They see their children grow up unfitted in mind and character to act a noble and useful part in society or in the home. Mental and physical powers suffer under the influence of unhealthful foods. The conscience becomes stupefied and the susceptibility to good impressions is impaired. Choose the best foods. In order to know what are the best foods, we must study God's original plan for man's diet. He who created man and who understands his needs appointed Adam his food. Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. Prepare them in a simple, appetizing way. God has furnished man with abundant means for the gratification of an unperverted appetite. He has spread before him the products of the earth, a bountiful variety of food that is palatable to the taste and nutritious to the system. Of these our benevolent Heavenly Father says we may freely eat. Fruits, grains, and vegetables prepared in a simple way, free from spice and grease of all kinds, make with milk or cream the most healthful diet. They impart nourishment to the body and give a power of endurance and a vigor of intellect that are not produced by a stimulating diet. Appetite, not a safe guide. Those foods should be chosen that best supply the elements needed for building up the body. In this choice, appetite is not a safe guide. Through wrong habits of eating, the appetite has become perverted. Often it demands food that impairs health and causes weakness instead of strength. The disease and suffering that everywhere prevail are largely due to popular errors in regard to diet. Children who followed an untrained appetite. While upon the cars, I heard parents remark that the appetites of their children were delicate, and unless they had meat and cake, they could not eat. When the new meal was taken, I observed the quality of food given to these children. It was fine wheaten bread, sliced ham coated with black pepper, spiced pickles, cake, and preserves. The pale, sallow complexion of these children plainly indicated the abuses the stomach was suffering. Two of these children observed another family of children eating cheese with their food, and they lost their appetite for what was before them until their indulgent mother begged a piece of the cheese to give to her children, fearing the dear children would fail to make out their meal. The mother remarked, "My children love this or that so much, and I let them have what they want, for the appetite craves the kind of food the system requires." This might be correct if the appetite had never been perverted. There is a natural and a depraved appetite. Parents who have taught their children to eat unhealthful, stimulating food all their lives until the taste is perverted, and they crave clay, slate pencils, burned coffee, tea grounds, cinnamon, cloves, and spices, cannot claim that the appetite demands what the system requires. The appetite has been falsely educated until it is depraved. The fine organs of the stomach have been stimulated and burned until they have lost their delicate sensitiveness. Simple, healthful food seems to them insipid. The abused stomach will not perform the work given it unless urged to it by the most stimulating substances. If these children had been trained from their infancy to take only healthful food, prepared in the most simple manner, preserving its natural properties as much as possible, and avoiding flesh meats, grease, and all spices, the taste and appetite would be unimpaired. In its natural state, it might indicate in a great degree the food best adapted to the wants of the system. What about flesh foods? We do not mark out any precise line to be followed in diet, but we do say that in countries where there are fruits, grains, and nuts in abundance, Flesh food is not the right food for God's people. I have been instructed that flesh food has a tendency to animalize the nature, to rob men and women of that love and sympathy which they should feel for everyone, and to give the lower passions control over the higher powers of the being. If meat eating was ever helpful, it is not safe now. Reasons for discarding flesh foods. Those who eat flesh are but eating grains and vegetables at second hand, for the animal receives from these things the nutrition that produces growth. The life that was in the grains and vegetables passes into the eater. We receive it by eating the flesh of the animal. How much better to get it direct by eating the food that God provided for our use. Flesh was never the best food, but its use is now doubly objectionable since disease in animals is so rapidly increasing. Those who use flesh foods little know what they are eating. Even if they could see the animals when living and know the quality of the meat they eat, they would turn from it with loathing. People are continually eating flesh that is filled with tuberculous and cancerous germs. Tuberculosis, cancer, and other fatal diseases are thus communicated. Effects not immediately realized. The effects of a flesh diet may not be immediately realized, but this is no evidence that it is not harmful. Few can be made to believe that it is the meat that they have eaten which has poisoned their blood and caused their suffering. Many die of disease wholly due to meat eating, while the real cause is not suspected by themselves or by others. Return to the original wholesome diet. Is it not time that all should aim to dispense with flesh foods? How can those who are seeking to become pure, refined, and holy, that they may have the companionship of heavenly angels, continue to use as food anything that has so harmful an effect on soul and body? How can they take the life of God's creatures that they may consume the flesh as a luxury? Let them rather return to the wholesome and delicious food given to man. The course of those awaiting Christ's coming. Among those who are waiting for the coming of the Lord, meat eating will eventually be done away. Flesh will cease to form a part of their diet. We should ever keep this end in view and endeavor to work steadily toward it. I cannot think that in the practice of flesh eating we are in harmony with the life which God has been pleased to give us. Back to God's design. Again and again I have been shown that God is bringing his people back to his original design. That is, not to subsist on the flesh of dead animals. He would have us teach people a better way. If meat is discarded, if the taste is not educated in that direction, if a liking for fruits and grains is encouraged, it will soon be as God in the beginning designed it should be. No meat will be used by his people. Instruction concerning a change in diet. It is a mistake to suppose that muscular depends on the use of animal food. The needs of the system can be better supplied and more vigorous health can be enjoyed without its use. The grains with fruits, nuts, and vegetables contain all the nutritive properties necessary to make good blood. These elements are not so well or so fully supplied by a flesh diet. Had the use of flesh been essential to health and strength, animal food would have been included in the diet appointed man in the beginning. When the use of flesh food is discontinued, there is often a sense of weakness, a lack of vigor. Many urge this as evidence that flesh food is essential, but it is because foods of this class are stimulating, because they fever the blood and excite the nerves, that they are so missed. Some will find it as difficult to leave off flesh eating as it is for the drunkard to give up his dram, but they will be the better for the change. When flesh food is discarded, its place should be supplied with a variety of grains, nuts, vegetables, and fruits that will be both nourishing and appetizing. This is especially necessary in the case for those who are weak or who are taxed with continuous labor. Well-prepared substitutes are helpful, especially where meat is not made a principal article of food. Is good cooking an essential requirement? Something must be prepared to take the place of meat, and these substitutes for meat must be well prepared so that meat will not be desired. I am acquainted with families who have changed from a meat diet to one that is impoverished. Their food is so poorly prepared that the stomach loathes it, and such have told me that the health reform did not agree with them, that they were decreasing in physical strength. Here is one reason why some have not been successful in their efforts to simplify their food. They have a poverty-stricken diet. Food is prepared without painstaking, and there is a continual sameness. There should not be many kinds at any one meal, but all meals should not be composed of the same kinds of food without variation. Food should be prepared with simplicity, yet with a nicety that will invite the appetite. Overcoming the unnatural appetite. Persons who have accustomed themselves to a rich, highly stimulating diet have an unnatural taste, and they cannot at once relish food that is plain and simple. It will take time for the taste to become natural and for the stomach to recover from the abuse it has suffered. But those who persevere in the use of wholesome food will, after a time, find it palatable. Its delicate and delicious flavors will be appreciated with greater enjoyment than can be derived from unwholesome dainties. Healthful eating is not a sacrifice. While the children should be taught to control the appetite and to eat with reference to health, let it be made plain that they are denying themselves only that which would do them harm. They give up hurtful things for something better. Let the table be made inviting and attractive as it is supplied with the good things that God has so bountifully bestowed. Consider the season, climate, occupation. Not all foods wholesome in themselves are equally suited to our needs under all circumstances. Care should be taken in the selection of food. Our diet should be suited to the season, to the climate in which we live, and to the occupation we follow. Some foods that are adapted for use at one season or in one climate are not suited to another. So there are different foods best suited for persons in different occupations. Often food that can be used with benefit by those engaged in hard physical labor is unsuitable for persons of sedentary pursuits or intense mental application. God has given us an ample variety of healthful foods, and each person should choose from it the things that experience and sound judgment prove to be best suited for his own necessities. Prepare food with intelligence and skill. It is wrong to eat merely to gratify the appetite, but no indifference should be manifested regarding the quality of the food or the manner of its preparation. If the food eaten is not relished, the body will not be so well nourished. The food should be carefully chosen and prepared with intelligence and skill. We can pick up anything. In many families, great preparations are made for visitors. A variety of food is prepared for the table. This food is tempting to those unaccustomed to such a variety of rich food. I have a knowledge of the course pursued by some who make these extra preparations for visitors. In their own families, they observe no regularity. The meals are prepared to suit the convenience of the wife and mother. The happiness of the husband and children is not studied. Though such a parade is made for visitors, anything is thought against the wall. A cold meal placed on it with no effort to make it inviting is too often seen. Only for us, they say, we can pick up anything. Make the mealtime a pleasant social occasion. Mealtime should be a season for social intercourse and refreshment. Everything that can burden or irritate should be rebellion should be cultivated in the children by some unreasonable course pursued by the parents. The whole family should eat with gladness, with gratitude, remembering that those who love and obey God will partake of the marriage supper of the Lamb in the kingdom of God, and Jesus himself will serve them. Regularity in eating. Irregularities in eating destroy the healthful tone of the digestive organs to the detriment of health and cheerfulness. In no case should the meals be irregular. If dinner is eaten an hour or two before the usual time, the stomach is unprepared for the new burden, for it has not yet disposed of the food eaten at the previous. Thus the system is overtaxed. Neither should the meal be delayed 1 or 2 hours to suit circumstances or in order that a certain amount of work may be accomplished. The stomach calls for food at the time it is accustomed to receive it. If that time is delayed, the appetite is entirely gone. If food is then taken, the stomach is unable to properly care for it. The food cannot be converted into good blood. If all would eat at regular periods, not tasting anything between meals, they would be ready for their meals and would find a pleasure in eating that would repay them for their effort. Teach children when, how, and what to eat. Children are generally untaught in regard to the importance of when, how, and what they should eat. They are permitted to indulge their taste freely, to eat at all hours, to help themselves to fruit when it tempts their eyes, and this with pie, cake, bread and butter, and sweetmeats eaten almost constantly makes them gourmands and dyspeptics. The digestive organs, like a mill which is continually kept running, become enfeebled. Vital force is called from the brain to aid the stomach in its overwork, and thus the mental powers are weakened. The unnatural stimulation and wear of the vital forces make them nervous, impatient of restraint, self-willed, and irritable. They can scarcely be trusted out of their parents' sight. In many cases, the moral powers seem deadened, and it is difficult to arouse them to a sense of the shame and grievous nature of sin. They slip easily into habits of prevarication, deceit, and often open lying. Parents deplore these things in their children, but do not realize that it is their own bad management which has brought about the evil. They have not seen the necessity of restraining the appetites and passions of their children, and they have grown and strengthened with their years. Mothers prepare with their own hands and place before their children food which has a tendency to injure them physically and mentally. Never eat between meals. The stomach must have careful attention. It must not be kept in continual operation. Give this misused and much abused organ some peace and quiet and rest. After the regular meal is eaten, the stomach should be allowed to rest for 5 hours. Not a particle of food should be introduced into the stomach until the next meal. In this interval, the stomach will perform its work and will then be in a condition to receive more food. Mothers make a great mistake in permitting their children to eat between meals. The stomach becomes deranged by this practice, and the foundation is laid for future suffering. Their fretfulness may have been caused by unwholesome food, still undigested, but the mother feels that she cannot spend time to reason upon the matter and correct her injurious management. Neither can she stop to soothe their impatient worrying. She gives the little sufferers a piece of cake or some other dainty to quiet them, but this only increases the evil. Mothers often complain of the delicate health of their children and consult the physician, when if they would but exercise a little common sense, they would see that the trouble is caused by errors in diet. Late snacks, a pernicious habit. Another pernicious habit is that of eating just before bedtime. The regular meals may have been taken, but because there is a sense of faintness, more food is taken. By indulgence, this wrong practice becomes a habit and often so firmly fixed that it is thought impossible to sleep without food. As a result of eating late suppers, the digestive process is continued through the sleeping hours. But though the stomach works constantly, its work is not properly accomplished. The sleep is often disturbed with unpleasant dreams, and in the morning the person awakes unrefreshed and with little relish for breakfast. When we lie down to rest, the stomach should have its work all done, that it, as well as the other organs of the body, may enjoy rest. For persons of sedentary habits, late suppers are particularly harmful. With them, the disturbance created is often the beginning of disease that ends in death. A mother counsels that breakfast is important. Your child has a nervous temperament, and her diet should be carefully guarded. She should not be allowed to choose that food which will gratify the taste without affording proper nourishment. Never let her go from home to school without her breakfast. Do not venture to give full scope to your inclinations in this matter. Place yourself entirely under the control of God, and He will help you to bring all your desires into harmony with His requirements. It is the custom and order of society to take a slight breakfast, but this is not the best way to treat the stomach. At breakfast time, the stomach is in a better condition to take care of more food than at the second or third meal of the day. The habit of eating a sparing breakfast and a large dinner is wrong. Make your breakfast correspond more nearly to the heartiest meal of the day. Provide an abundance of the best food. Children and youth should not be underfed in the least degree. They should have an abundance of healthful food. But this does not mean that it is proper to place before them rich cakes and pastries. They should have plenty of bread and butter and sweet meats, and they should have plenty of fruit and vegetables. They should have plenty of milk and cheese, and they should have plenty of milk. essential. Parents, place before your children the amount they should eat. Leave it not with them to eat just as much as they may feel inclined. Parents, unless this point is guarded, your children will have dull perceptions. They may attend school, but they will be unable to learn as they ought, for the strength which should go to the brain is used in taking care of the extra food that burdens the stomach. Parents need to be educated to see that too much food given to children makes them feeble instead of robust. Parents, not children, to dictate here. Teach them to deny appetite, to be grateful for the plain, simple diet God gives them. It is not for you to allow them to dictate to you what they should eat, but you should dictate what is best for them. It is a sin for you to allow your children to murmur and complain about good, wholesome food just because it does not suit their depraved appetites. Do not let the child receive the impression that because he is your child, he must therefore be deferred to and permitted to choose and direct his own way. He should not be permitted to choose articles of food that are not good for him simply because he likes them. The experience of parents should have a controlling power in the life of the child. Respect child's preference if reasonable. It rests with us individually to decide whether our lives shall be controlled by the mind or by the body. The youth must each for himself make the choice that shapes his life, and no pain should be spared that he may understand the forces with which he has to deal and the influences which mold character and destiny. In the education of children and youth, they should be taught that the habits of eating, drinking, and dressing, which have been formed after the world's standard, are not in accordance with the laws of health and life and must be held in control by reason and intellect. The power of appetite and strength of habit should not be permitted to overpower the dictates of reason. In order to secure this object, the youth must have higher aims and motives than mere animal gratification in eating and drinking. Far-reaching effects of perverted appetite. Some are not impressed with the necessity of eating and drinking to the glory of God. The indulgence of appetite affects them in all the relations of life. It is seen in the family, in the church, in the prayer meeting, and in the conduct of their children. It is the curse of their lives. It prevents them from understanding the truths for these last days. Healthful living is personal obligation. What we eat and drink has an important bearing upon our lives and characters, and Christians should bring their habits of eating and drinking into conformity to the laws of nature. We must sense our obligations to God in these matters. Obedience to the laws of health should be made a matter of earnest study, for willing ignorance on this subject is sin. Each one should feel a personal obligation to carry out the laws of healthful living. Chapter 63, Temperance in All Things. Intemperance causes most of life's ills. Intemperance is at the foundation of the larger share of the ills of life. It annually destroys tens of thousands. We do not speak of intemperance as limited only to the use of intoxicating liquors, but give it a broader meaning, including the hurtful indulgence of any appetite or passion. Through intemperance, some sacrifice one half and others two-thirds of their physical, mental, and moral powers and become playthings for the enemy. Excessive indulgence is sin. Excessive indulgence in eating, drinking, sleeping, or seeing is sin. The harmonious, healthy action of all the powers of body and mind results in happiness, and the more elevated and refined the powers, the more pure and unalloyed the happiness. Temperance is a principle of the religious life. Temperance in all things of this life is to be taught and practiced. Temperance in eating, drinking, sleeping, and dressing is one of the grand principles of the religious life. Truth brought into the sanctuary of the soul will guide in the treatment of the body. Nothing that concerns the health of the human agent is to be regarded with indifference. Our eternal welfare depends upon the use we make during this life of our time, strength, and influence. Only one lease of life is granted us here, and the inquiry with everyone should be, how can I invest my life that it may yield the greatest profit? Our first duty toward God and our fellow beings is that of self-development. Every faculty with which the Creator has endowed us should be cultivated to the highest degree of perfection, that we may be able to do the greatest amount of good of which we are capable. Hence that time is spent to good account which is directed to the establishment and preservation of sound physical and mental health. We cannot afford to dwarf or cripple a single function of mind or body by overwork or by abuse of any part of the living machinery. As surely as we do this, we must suffer the consequences. It has a wonderful power. The observance of temperance and regularity in all things has a wonderful power. It will do more than circumstances or natural endowments in promoting that sweetness and serenity of disposition which counts so much in smoothing life's pathway. At the same time, the power of self-control thus acquired will be found one of the most valuable of equipments for grappling successfully with the stern duties and realities that await every human being. An aid to clear thinking. Every day, men in positions of trust have decisions to make upon which depend results of great importance. Often they have to think rapidly, and this can be done successfully by those only who practice strict temperance. The mind strengthens under the correct treatment of the physical and mental powers. If the strain is not too great, new vigor comes with every taxation. Temperate habits yield rich rewards. The rising generation are surrounded with allurements calculated to tempt the appetite. Especially in our large cities, every form of indulgence is made easy and inviting. Those who, like Daniel, refuse to defile themselves will reap the reward of their temperate habits. With their greater physical stamina and increased power of endurance, they have a bank of deposit upon which to draw in case of emergency. Right physical habits promote mental superiority. Intellectual power, physical strength, and longevity depend upon the immutable laws. There is no happen so, no chance about this matter. Nature's God will not interfere to preserve men from the consequences of violating nature's laws. For perfect health, be temperate in all things. In order to preserve health, temperance in all things is necessary. Our Heavenly Father sent the light of health reform to guard against the evils resulting from a debased appetite, that those who love purity and holiness may know how to use with discretion the good things He has provided for them, and that by exercising temperance in daily life they may be sanctified through the truth. Temperance precedes sanctification. God's people are to learn the meaning of temperance in all things. All self-indulgence is to be cut away from their lives. Before they can really understand the meaning of true sanctification and of conformity to the will of Christ, they must, by cooperating with God, obtain the mastery over wrong habits and practices. In study, intemperance in study is a species of intoxication, and those who indulge in it, like the drunkard, wander from safe paths and stumble and fall in the darkness. The Lord would have every student bear in mind that the eye must be kept single to the glory of God. He is not to exhaust and waste his physical and mental powers in seeking to acquire all possible knowledge of the sciences, but is to preserve the freshness and vigor of all his powers to engage in the work which the Lord has appointed him in helping souls to find the path of righteousness. In work, we should practice temperance in our labor. It is not our duty to place ourselves where we shall be overworked. Some may at times be placed where this is necessary, but it should be the exception, not the rule. We are to practice temperance in all things. If we honor the Lord by acting our part, He will on His part preserve our health. We should have a sensible control of all our organs. By practicing temperance in eating and drinking, in dressing, in labor, and in all things, we can do for ourselves what no physician can do for us. As a rule, the labor of the day should not be prolonged into the evening. I have been shown that those who do this often lose much more than they gain, for their energies are exhausted and they labor on nervous excitement. They may not realize any immediate injury, but they are surely undermining their constitution. Those who make great exertions to accomplish just so much work in a given time and continue to labor when their judgment tells them they should rest are never gainers. They are living on borrowed capital. They are expending the vital force which they will need at a future time. And when the energy they have so recklessly used is demanded, they fail for want of it. The physical strength is gone. The mental powers fail. They realize that they have met with a loss, but do not know what it is. Their time of need has come, but their physical resources are exhausted. Everyone who violates the laws of health must sometime be a sufferer to a greater or less degree. God has provided us with constitutional force which will be needed in different periods of our lives. If we recklessly exhaust this force by continual overtaxation, we shall sometime be the losers. In dressing, In all respects, the dress should be healthful. Above all things, God desires us to be in health, health of body and of soul, and we are to be workers together with Him for the health of both soul and body. Both are promoted by healthful dress. It should have the grace, the beauty, the appropriateness of natural simplicity. Christ has warned us against the pride of life, but not against its grace and natural beauty. In eating, true temperance teaches us to dispense entirely with everything hurtful and to use judiciously that which is healthful. There are few who realize, as they should, how much their habits of diet have to do with their health, their character, their usefulness in this world, and their eternal destiny. The appetite should ever be in subjection to the moral and intellectual powers. The body should be servant to the mind, and not the mind to the body. Those who eat and work intemperately and irrationally talk and act irrationally. It is not necessary to drink alcoholic liquors in order to be intemperate. The sin of intemperate eating, eating too frequently, too much, and of rich, unwholesome food, destroys the healthy action of the digestive organs, affects the brain, and perverts the judgment, preventing rational, calm, healthy thinking and acting. Special care not to overeat. In 9 cases out of 10, there is more danger of eating too much than too little. There are many sick who suffer from no disease. The cause of their sickness is indulgence of appetite. They think that if the food is healthful, they may eat as much as they please. This is a great mistake. Persons whose powers are debilitated should eat a moderate and even limited amount of food. The system will then be enabled to do its work easily and well, and a great deal of suffering will be saved. Do not deny God by one act of intemperance. We have been bought with a price. Therefore, we are to glorify God in our body and in our spirit, which are His. We are not to deny Him by one act of intemperance, because the only begotten Son of God has purchased us at an infinite cost, even the sacrifice of His life. He did not die for us in order that we might become slaves to evil habits, but that we might become the sons and daughters of God, serving Him with every power of the being. Those who have a constant realization that they stand in this relation to God will not place in the stomach food which pleases the appetite, but which injures the digestive organs. They will not spoil the property of God by indulging improper habits of eating, drinking, or dressing. They will take great care of the human machinery, realizing that they must do this in order to work in co-partnership with God. He wills that they shall be healthy, happy, and useful, but in order for them to be this, they must place their wills on the side of His will. Carry temperance into all details of home life. We urge that the principles of temperance be carried into all the details of home life, that the example of parents should be a lesson of temperance, that self-denial and self-control should be taught to the children and enforced upon them so far as consistent from babyhood. In the family circle and in the church, we should place Christian temperance on an elevated platform. It should be a living, working element, reforming habits, dispositions, and characters. Chapter 64, The Home and the Temperance Crusade. Intemperance is on the rampage. Intemperance still continues its ravages. Iniquity in every form stands like a mighty barrier to prevent the progress of truth and righteousness. Social wrongs born of ignorance and vice are still causing untold misery and casting their baleful shadow upon both the church and the world. Depravity among the youth is increasing instead of decreasing. Nothing but earnest, continual effort will avail to remove this desolating curse. The conflict with interest and appetite, with evil habits and unholy passions, will be fierce and deadly. Only those who shall move from principle can gain the victory in this warfare. Intemperance is on the increase in spite of the efforts made to control it. We cannot be too earnest in seeking to hinder its progress, to raise the fallen and shield the weak from temptation. With our feeble human hands, we can do but little, but we have an unfailing helper. We must not forget that the arm of Christ can reach to the very depths of human woe and degradation. He can give us help to conquer even this terrible demon of intemperance. Total abstinence is the answer. The only way in which any can be secure against the power of intemperance is to abstain wholly from wine, beer, and strong drinks. We must teach our children that in order to be manly, they must let these things alone. God has shown us what constitutes true manliness. It is he that overcometh who will be honored, and whose name will not be blotted out of the book of life. Parents may, by earnest, persevering effort, unbiased by the customs of fashionable life, build a moral bulwark about their children that will defend them from the miseries and crimes caused by intemperance. Children should not be left to come up as they will, unduly developing traits that should be nipped in the bud, but they should be disciplined carefully and educated to take their position upon the side of right, of reform, and abstinence. In every crisis, they will then have moral independence to breast the storm of opposition, sure to assail those who take their stand in favor of true reform. Intemperance is often a result of home indulgence. Great efforts are made in our country to put down intemperance, but it is found a hard matter to overpower and chain the full-grown lion. If half these efforts were directed toward enlightening parents as to their responsibility in forming the habits and characters of their children, 1,000-fold more good might result than from the present course. We bid all workers in the cause of temperance Godspeed, but we invite them to look deeper into the cause of the evil they war against and go more thoroughly and consistently into reform. In order to reach the root of intemperance, we must go deeper than the use of alcohol or tobacco. Idleness, lack of aim, or evil associations may be the predisposing cause. Often it is found at the home table, in families that account themselves strictly temperate. Anything that disorders digestion, that creates undue mental excitement, or in any way enfeebles the system, disturbing the balance of the mental and the physical powers, weakens the control of the mind over the body, and thus tends toward intemperance. The downfall of many a promising youth might be traced to unnatural appetites created by an unwholesome diet. The tables of our American people are generally prepared in a manner to make drunkards. Appetite is the ruling principle with a large class. Whoever will indulge appetite in eating too often and food not of a healthful quality is weakening his power to resist the clamors of appetite and passion in other respects in proportion as he has strengthened the propensity to incorrect habits of eating. Tea and coffee are contributing factors to the intemperance begun at home. The digestive organs first become weakened, and soon ordinary food does not satisfy the appetite. Unhealthy conditions are established, and there is a craving for more stimulating food. Tea and coffee produce an immediate effect. Under the influence of these poisons, the nervous system is excited, and in some cases, for the time being, the intellect seems to be invigorated, the imagination more vivid. Because these stimulants produce such agreeable results, many conclude that they really need them, but there is always a reaction. The nervous system has borrowed power from its future resources for present use, and all this temporary invigoration is followed by a corresponding depression. The suddenness of the relief obtained from tea and coffee is an evidence that what seems to be strength is only nervous excitement, and consequently must be an injury to the system. Tobacco, a subtle poison. Tobacco using is a habit which frequently affects the nervous system in a more powerful manner than does the use of alcohol. It binds the victim in stronger bands of slavery than does the intoxicating cup. The habit is more difficult to overcome. Body and mind are in many cases more thoroughly intoxicated with the use of tobacco than with spirituous liquors, for it is a more subtle poison. Tobacco affects the brain and benumbs the sensibilities so that the mind cannot clearly discern spiritual things, especially those truths which would have a tendency to correct this filthy indulgence. Those who use tobacco in any form are not clear before God. In such a filthy practice, it is impossible for them to glorify God in their bodies and spirits which are His. Tobacco weakens the brain and paralyzes its fine sensibilities. Its use excites a thirst for strong drink and in very many cases lays the foundation for the liquor habit. Effects of stimulants and narcotics. The effect of stimulants and narcotics is to lessen physical strength, and whatever affects the body will affect the mind. A stimulant may for a time arouse the energies and produce mental and physical activity, but when the exhilarating influence is gone, both mind and body will be in a worse condition than before. Intoxicating liquors and tobacco have proved a terrible curse to our race, not only weakening the body and confusing the mind, but debasing the morals. As the control of reason is set aside, the animal passions will bear sway. The more freely these poisons are used, the more brutish will become the nature. Teach children to abhor stimulants. Teach your children to abhor stimulants. How many are ignorantly fostering in them an appetite for these things? God calls upon parents to guard their children against the indulgence of appetite and especially against the use of stimulants and narcotics. The tables of Christian parents should never be loaded with food containing condiments and spices. They are to study to preserve the stomach from any abuse. In this fast age, the less exciting the food, the better. Temperance in all things and firm denial of appetite is the only path of safety. A challenge to parents. Parents may have transmitted to their children tendencies to appetite and passion, which will make more difficult the work of educating and training these children to be strictly temperate and to have pure and virtuous habits. If the appetite for unhealthy food and for stimulants and narcotics has been transmitted to them as a legacy from their parents, what a fearfully solemn responsibility rests upon the parents to counteract the evil tendencies which they have given to their children. How earnestly and diligently should the parents work to do their duty in faith and hope to their unfortunate offspring. Tastes and appetites must be educated. Parents should make it their first business to understand the laws of life and health, that nothing shall be done by them in the preparation of food or through any other habits which will develop wrong tendencies in their children. How carefully should mothers study to prepare their tables with the most simple, healthful food, that the digestive organs may not be weakened, the nervous forces unbalanced, and the instruction which they should give their children counteracted by the food placed before them. This food either weakens or strengthens the organs of the stomach and has much to do in controlling the physical and moral health of the children who are God's blood-bought property. What a sacred trust is committed to parents to guard the physical and moral constitutions of their children so that the nervous system may be well balanced and the soul not be endangered. Our sisters can do much in the great work for the salvation of others by spreading their tables with only healthful, nourishing food. They may employ their precious time in educating the tastes and appetites of their children, in forming habits of temperance in all things, and in encouraging self-denial and benevolence for the good of others. Negligent parents are responsible. Many parents, to avoid the task of patiently educating their children to habits of self-denial, indulge them in eating and drinking whenever they please. The desire to satisfy the taste and to gratify inclination does not lessen with the increase of years, and these indulged youth, as they grow up, are governed by impulse, slaves to appetite. When they take their place in society and begin life for themselves, they are powerless to resist temptation. In the glutton, the tobacco devotee, and in the inebriate, we see the evil results of erroneous education. When we hear the sad lamentation of Christian men and women over the terrible evils of intemperance, the questions at once arise: who have educated the youth? Who have fostered in them these unruly appetites? Who have neglected the solemn responsibility of forming their characters for usefulness in this life and for the society of heavenly angels in the next? The real work begins at home. It is in the home that the real work must begin. The greatest burden rests upon those who have the responsibility of educating the youth, of forming their character. Here is a work for mothers in helping their children to form correct habits and pure tastes, to develop moral stamina, true moral worth. Teach them that they are not to be swayed by others, that they are not to yield to wrong influences, but to influence others for good, to ennoble and elevate those with whom they associate. Teach them that if they connect themselves with God, they will have strength for Him to resist the fiercest temptations. Temperance is not a matter for jesting. Many make the subject of temperance a matter of jest. They claim that the Lord does not concern Him with such minor matters as our eating and drinking. But if the Lord had no care for these things, He would not have revealed Himself to the wife of Manoah, giving her definite instruction and twice enjoining upon her to beware lest she disregard them. Is not this sufficient evidence that He does care for these things? Reform begins with the mother. The carefulness with which the mother should guard her habits of life is taught in the Scriptures. The reform should begin with the mother before the birth of her children, and if God's instructions were faithfully obeyed, intemperance would not exist. Not only the habits of the mother, but the training of the child were included in the angel's instruction to the Hebrew parents. It was not enough that Samson, the child who was to deliver Israel, should have a good legacy at his birth. This was to be followed by careful training. From infancy, he was to be trained to habits of strict temperance. The directions given concerning the Hebrew children teach us that nothing which affects the child's physical well-being is to be neglected. Nothing is unimportant. Every influence that affects the health of the body has its bearing upon mind and character. Temperance and self-control should be taught from the cradle. Upon the mother largely rests the burden of this work, and aided by the father, she may carry it forward successfully. Continue the lessons at fireside and at school. It is a most difficult matter to unlearn the habits which have been indulged through life and have educated the appetite. The demon of intemperance is not easily conquered. It is of giant strength and hard to overcome. But let parents begin a crusade against intemperance at their own firesides, in their own families, in the principles they teach their children to follow from their very infancy, and they may hope for success. It will pay you, mothers, to use the precious hours which are given you of God in forming, developing, and training the characters of your children, and in teaching them to strictly adhere to the principles of temperance in eating and drinking. Instruction in this line should be given in every school and in every home. The youth and children should understand the effect of alcohol, tobacco, and other like poisons in breaking down the body, beclouding the mind, and sensualizing the soul. It should be made plain that no one who uses these things can long possess the full strength of his physical, mental, or moral faculties. Make plain the effect of small deviations. It is the beginnings of evil that should be guarded against. In the instruction of the youth, the effect of apparently small deviations from the right should be made very plain. Let the youth be impressed with the thought that they are to be masters and not slaves. Of the kingdom within them, God has made them rulers, and they are to exercise their heaven-appointed kingship. When such instruction is faithfully given, the results will extend far beyond the youth themselves. Influences will reach out that will save thousands of men and women who are on the very brink of ruin. Build moral stamina to resist temptation. Individual effort on the right side is needed to subdue the growing evil of intemperance. Oh, that we could find words that would melt and burn their way into the heart of every parent in the land. Parents may lay for their children the foundation for a healthy, happy life. They may send them forth from their homes with moral stamina to resist temptation and courage and strength to wrestle successfully with life's problems. They may inspire in them the purpose and develop the power to make their lives an honor to God and a blessing to the world. They may make straight paths for their feet through sunshine and shadow to the glorious heights above. God calls upon us to stand upon the broad platform of temperance in eating, drinking, and dressing. Parents, will you not awaken to your God-given responsibilities? Study the principles of health reform and teach your children that the path of self-denial is the only path of safety.
Okay, hello guys. Hanggang dito lang po, hindi natapos pa. So continue lang natin next week. I think that will be the last part for the child guidance book. And I hope you are blessed. Nakinig kayo sa readings. Thank you and have a nice day. Goodbye everyone. Thank you for staying with me. Love you all, guys. Have a nice day. Sa mga nandito, of course, kay Inday Namo, Guapa, salamat. To my sister, ako si Babin, thank you. Ingat mo diha, kasi kaming rabang bagyo. Padayon ra ko graba, mag-out na ko. Kay daghan paghimuon sa balay. Kay Ate Wagas Team Official, thank you. Nag-LS sad siya. So, daghan salamat sa inyo. Zion, come here. Say goodbye. Love you all, guys. Thank you for staying with me. I hope you have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye. Sawadee ka. Kapkun na ka.